Hey everyone, welcome to another hot take. This hot take is about the left side of politics in general, and my theories on kind of what's going wrong. Kind of. It's more of a contextual concept. Anyhow, there is a theory, not theory, but the way libertarians look at government programs. And that is, government programs never end. Once the federal government creates a program, unless it was designed to be temporary to begin with, which is extremely rare. Say like a government, you could technically call a government program to build a bridge, and once the bridge is done, that's it. That has like a deadline built into it, so that can't continue. What I'm talking about is the kind of government program that basically never ends. It's created to address a problem, but regardless of that problem, the program will never end. So the best example, I think one of them, would be the TSA, right? So the TSA was created in the aftermath of 9/11. And the concept behind it was, we're going to have this organization to check passengers to make sure terrorists don't get on our planes and blow them up. And by any metric, the TSA is an absolute disaster. It's a total failure. It's a complete waste of money and has done nothing but harass and annoy the people who just want to get on a plane and go wherever. It's added expense to airports. It's added expense to, of course, the taxpayer, because we pay for it. And it's just a complete boondoggle at this point. If you think that's not the case, then I urge you to go on the internet and do some research on it. It's an absolute disaster. Every statistic on the TSA just about is a complete and utter failure. Every test they've ever had of it, just total failure. And yet, the TSA has a PR budget. It will, show up to meetings about it, prepared to go to defend itself, because government programs are always like that. So why do I talk about the TSA with regard to the left side of politics in general? That was technically a right-sided political thing because Bush created it, but it's because it goes to something that Jordan Peterson said about the left. The left doesn't know where they go too far. On the right, it's easy. On the right, people go too far when they get all racist. And, when they say, well, there should only be this kind of people in the country. No. Too far, get out. On the left, you have people who wholeheartedly embrace communism and socialism, and yet they continue to be around. No one calls them out. Very few people. There's a handful of people who don't really hold any power, but some. And I think this goes into why programs never end. Government programs never end. So if you're on the left side of politics, even if you're just your average Democrat, and let's say you're a politician, if you see a problem, chances are, if someone comes to you and you're in the government and you're on the left side of politics and say, we have this problem, chances are you'll say, we can solve that problem. We can get a task force, we'll get some money, we're going to solve that problem. Which on its surface sounds like a great idea. The problem then becomes, what happens if you do solve the problem? The problem with that is the entity that you've created never ends. The people within that government program don't want their jobs to end. Who wants to come into work one day and say, you know what, boss? I'm really unnecessary. No one does that. No one's going to, you're not going to see the guys in the TSA all get together and go, you know what, this has been a complete failure. Let's just go to Congress and shut this whole thing down. No one would do that because the people who get hired in those positions, they want to be there. They want to make money. They don't want to end their own job. There's no incentive to do that. And so this is the perpetuating thing about bureaucracies. I think it's why the UK has such an insane bureaucracy, and most of Europe. Their bureaucracies have lasted longer, technically. I mean, they haven't been technically, democracies their entire history, but they've been around for so long. There's this expectation that, everything that's done, it just keeps continuing. It's like a ship moving along the water, brand new ship, and it collects barnacles, and the barnacles just never come off. They never get scraped off. The only time it kind of happens is when sometimes you get some conservatives in who will cut programs. Typically, they only cut certain ones that don't affect voters and people. So like the TSA, there's absolutely I shouldn't say no, but there's very little political will to end the TSA. There was at the very beginning. There's a subreddit called Operation Grabass, which was dedicated to basically blasting the TSA at every turn. But, as these programs get or extend longer and longer, people sort of just accept their fate and go, well, it's not going to stop. And they kind of just move on with their lives. And that's a shame because the TSA is really awful. I think it's terrible. It's made me never want to fly. I never want to fly. I mean, it's bad enough. I'm already a shaky flyer, but now that the TSA is there, I really don't want to fly. And I think, if anything, the TSA is a hindrance rather than a help to find people. I think the airports themselves or the airlines could probably do a better job. Anyhow, before I get into a libertarian rant, how does this connect into the left? Well, the left doesn't know when they go too far. So how would the left know when a government program is unnecessary? If they can't even figure out when their own ideology goes far, if they can't even kick out people who are obviously twisted. I mean, you got to be pretty twisted to talk about communism like it could work. I mean, that's pretty twisted. If you can't even get up to gumption and go, hey, communism doesn't work. If you're going to support communism, go over there and do not support communism over here where Democrats are. That's what should happen. There should be a dividing line between Democrats, socialists, and communists. There should be a big line, and Democrats should be totally on that because it's their party. They're on the left, and they should be the standard bearers. And if they can't do that, then they have to suffer everything that socialists and communists say because they're accepting of them. So if you can't even, say that that's too much, how are you going to say, well, the TSA has gone too far? How are you going to say that it's time to end farm subsidies? We have farm subsidies. I mean, Trump recently kicked some up, but I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the farm subsidies that started under FDR. They're still around. A lot of them. I don't think any of them have been canceled. They should be gone. They should have been gone decades ago. World War II is over. Whatever imagined crisis FDR saw, that's been done. That should all be gone. So this is why, Trump's rule of get rid of 2 regulations for every one barely scratches the surface. Libertarians, we want to throw out a whole bunch. We want to throw out whole departments. We want to throw out the Department of Commerce, the Department of Education. All these rules and regulations gone because they're just accumulation of barnacles over the years to address problems that some of which don't even exist anymore. The income tax. It originally started out as a tax to pay off the Civil War. I think we paid off the Civil War a long time ago. Now, you can argue, well, we need the income tax because of other reasons, but the point is still the same. They didn't end it then. They just took the income tax and say, oh, well, now we need it for this. The same thing would happen with the TSA. If tomorrow all terrorists disappeared, if tomorrow, we developed a technology that made it impossible for people to get on planes with any kind of weapon, the TSA would still be there. They would say, well, now we check other things in the airports, or now we check the airport itself. Now it's not so much the planes, it's the airports. People could still get stabbed. They'll come up with any excuse to keep their jobs. Why wouldn't they? They work there. They want their jobs. They're not going to come in and go, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I don't know why we're here. No one's going to do that. So I think we can't expect people on the left side of politics to say, hey, that problem, we don't touch. We don't get involved in that. See, that's not what a Democrat would say. And because of that, I think what happens is if you're on the Democratic side or liberal side or left side or whatever, you say, well, I just want a couple of programs. But see, you can't stop at a couple. It's like potato chips. You can't just stop at one. So you have a couple of programs and a few of them don't work. So is the response to shut them down? No. The response is, well, we got to fix them. We need more money. You can try to fix them and you put more money into it. Nah, that's not working. Well, maybe we need a task force to oversee things. And you spend more money and more money. And, there's no end to it. It just keeps, it's like a black hole for tax dollars. And really, these politicians, it's not their money. It's not coming out of their pocket. They don't see it that way. It's like, well, that's a taxpayer's money. We all pay that. So what you end up with is blurring the line between Democrats and Democratic Socialists, like Bernie Sanders. And here's a guy who's been pushing free healthcare, free college, free lots of things for years. But it's an unsustainable model. It's not free, number one. And the people who potentially could pay it in his imagination will leave the country or hide their money. They're the people in power. They're never going to pay those taxes. So who pays for it? Well, the middle class and even the people below them. They're going to end up paying. And that will make all those systems not work. So what will happen? More programs. Because the solution will not be, hey, let's dismantle Obamacare. And eventually the Republicans are just going to give that up. They don't have any choice. I mean, at some point, they're going to give it up. And at some point, you're going to see Democrats, when they're back in power, come forward and say, well, we need to fix health care. It's messed up, and here are all the reasons. We have all these complaints. People will complain about virtually anything. And there's always going to be problems. You're never going to have a zero-sum game of all the problems are fixed. Not with something like health care, with the TSA even. No, there'll always be problems you could point to. There'll always be terrorists you could point to. But that doesn't necessarily mean the TSA or national health care is the answer. It just means that there are problems. There are some problems you can't fix. So, for instance, school shootings or, random shootings, whatever you want to call them. You can't fix that problem. You could take away every gun in America and make them illegal. You can make bullets illegal. You can execute people on the street for having a gun or even talking about guns. There will still be people who pick up a gun somehow and kill a bunch of people. They're mentally ill and they don't care. They don't care about themselves. They don't care about the people around them. They just want to hurt everybody before they die. So, if you're a Democratic Socialist, and I think I talked about this in another video, although I may have deleted it. Sometimes I delete my videos if I don't like them. If I get too rambly. Sorry if I'm too rambly. Anyhow, I see that if you're a Democrat, it's easy to become a Democratic Socialist because you just accumulate these barnacles and eventually you get sucked into more and more government programs. The same thing can be said for a democratic socialist. Bernie Sanders could easily become a full-blown socialist. I mean, really he is. I think he called himself a socialist at one point. I think he rebranded himself as a democratic socialist. But, you know, what's the difference between free healthcare, free college? I mean, at that point, yeah, you might as well be the guy who says, okay, you know, we got to set the labor rates. I mean, he basically wants to do it. There's not a lot of daylight there. So if you're putting all these onerous regulations on business and they're not working, and you have only to look at a city like San Francisco and see all their onerous housing regulation and see how that's not working, it's just a small step to go, well, if we controlled all the labor markets, if we set all the prices, then we could fix it. That seems like the solution. But the fact of the matter is, you cannot do that. No person can process all the variables. No computer can process all the variables. There's just too many of them. People are too weird and stupid. People randomly shoot up places. The computer model can't predict that. So people aren't monoliths. They do random shit and trends happen. I mean, who would have predicted this woke trend, 10 years ago? Let's say 15 years ago. Now, I was around 15 years ago. I never saw this coming. There's no way you could see this coming. I mean, we had some woke stuff in the 90s, but not like now. That's borderline. It's full-blown racism from a lot of the left. It's crazy. We have Antifa, a violent left-wing organization that embraces communism and socialism. Never could have seen that 15 years ago. No way. No way. I mean, 15 years ago, they were saying how great Bush was and how the response to 9/11, we were going to kick ass and get revenge for America or whatever. People weren't talking about Antifa and rising up and smashing the bourgeois and all that bullshit. So, and there's going to be something else in the future. We're going to go, wow, what the hell? There's always something new. Things change. It's the only thing of life you can count on, and things will change. There's going to be a technology you're going to plug in the back of your head, and it's going to be and forget people on their phones. That's going to be a thing of the past. You're going to plug in right to your brain. You're going to be walking around like, yeah, I'm looking at you, but actually in my head, I'm looking at the internet. So there's going to be an entire different world coming soon. So these regulations, these barnacles, they keep hanging around even though they're worthless. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't have laws and modes of behavior up to a point, but it has to be minimum. It has to be bare minimum. You can't embrace these. And really, as I've said, I must have said this in a previous video, but socialism is just communism light. Okay, it's just a small step from going to, well, we just need to really set all the labor markets to, well, we should really nationalize the companies. Nobody can seem to build anything. Of course, you've crippled them. If you cripple them by putting up so many regulations, you can't even provide basic functions. Yeah, then the next step is, well, we got to run it because obviously you can't. There's no end. There's no end to that. And that's the problem with the left. They need to come up with a line. This is the line we will not cross. We will not embrace communism. We will not embrace socialism. We will create government programs that help people up to a point. We will have government programs that have a sunset date in them. That's probably should be every government program. Every year it should be like, are we going to continue this government program? And it should be a real discussion every year, whether or not it should continue at all. Because, Trump, during his campaign, talked about condensing all the law enforcement groups, NSA, CIA, FBI. And those guys hate him now because that's billions and billions of dollars at stake. You're never going to get that back. You're never going to, you're going to have to literally fight a war to get rid of the FBI, CIA, and NSA, or even condense them. They're really a lot of redundancies in there. So, anyhow, that's the problem with the left. So lefties, Give me your comments. Tell me what the limits are. Tell me what limits you would set. Put it in the comments, and also in the comments, check out my book, Wokistan, a Novel, written by me and Christian Baranak. The Pineys, Book 1, Book 2 coming out soon. And check out the Webcomic Factory and Superfrat. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.